64% of the population are overweight, but about 20% of people are obese. It's a 200% increase since 1985.
So within 6 months of committing to a fasting regimen, I reversed polycystic ovarian syndrome, fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, and I lost 60 pounds.
THC can come on stronger and last longer in edibles.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Marissa Lennox.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Marissa Lennox. Have the words, "I'm going to start my diet tomorrow," or "this is the year I'm going to get healthy," ever left your lips? On today's show, we'll discuss the top food and diet trends from keto to intermittent fasting, and later a guide to sustainable cocktails. We have a lot of ground to cover, but before we dive in, let's tee up the topic.
Every year, new diet and food trends come and go. After all, they're called fads for a reason. At the top of the list, the Keto Diet, the Paleo Diet, and the newest craze, intermittent fasting. Currently, only 8% of Canadians are trying intermittent fasting, but 16% have done it in the past, and another 28% are likely to consider it for the future. 11% of Canadians have tried keto, while 4% have tried paleo. Currently, 3% of Canadians do not consume gluten, and another 5% follow a diet with reduced gluten content. 67% do not follow any particular type of diet. The trend to reduce animal proteins is definitely gaining momentum. While only 7% of Canadians currently follow a primarily plant-based diet, 27% are considering doing so in the future.
So first of all, Rose, how are we doing as a country? Because with so many diets, are we losing weight?
No, we're not losing weight. Actually, about 64% of the population are overweight, obese, but about 20% of people are obese. Mm-hmm. And what's scary is that's a 200% increase since 1985. More frightening for all of us with children, grandchildren, is that 30% of kids today are overweight. Mm-hmm. So we're doing something wrong, Marissa.
Mm-hmm. Irene, every time I pick up a magazine, it seems to be touting some new diet fad or some new trend. I guess my question is, what's driving this? And is it working? Obviously not.
I don't know if it's necessarily working, only because when readers tend to pick up magazines with sensationalist headlines, they tend to get overwhelmed. What our readers really need are step-by-step directions almost to let you know how to get to a healthier eating pattern, as opposed to just, all these sensationalist headlines to say, lose weight fast.
But who's driving, Nadine, what's driving this, and who are the people looking to diet?
Everyone. There are so many people that come to my office confused about what they should be eating. Because there are so many diets and trends that they can be following, people are so confused, and they come and they need guidance around what is best for them. Mm-hmm. So that's what I do. I help them figure out what's best for them.
And that's so key, right? Because when you keep reading about all of these different trends and diets, the truth is everyone digests food differently. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all, Megan, diet that suits everyone.
No, I work with a lot of patients, not just in Toronto, but all over the world. And I've seen dietary extremes do wonders for people. And then most people do well somewhere in the middle, whether it's a little bit more plant-based or with a little bit more animal protein. So it's really a customized approach that people need to nutrition. There's no one-size-fits-all.
When I think about my parents and grandparents, they never dieted a day in their lives, and they're doing just fine. But their approach has always been everything in moderation.
And that is my approach. Unless you have an overriding disease or a specific allergy, eat the rainbow. Eat the rainbow, which means don't focus on one fruit or vegetable, but eat a wide variety every single day. Get the high levels of vitamin C and antioxidants through that, and indulge in meat moderately, and choose. I'm sure Nadine is going to tell us about the healthy fats and the healthy meats.
But you bring up an interesting point. The Canada Food Guide, just reduced meaty proteins to pack them together within a sort of a protein section. How significant is that? And what are some general healthy eating trends that we should be adopting?
I think in general, the standard American diet, which a lot of Canadians follow, is not healthy. It's full of too many starches, too many refined carbohydrates, unhealthy fats from vegetable oils. And so it's really important that people start understanding and recognizing what is a healthy fat versus an unhealthy fat.
But what about red meat? I mean, that seems to be the thing that people are always debating. Red meat, no red meat, just stick to chicken, or frankly, just go all vegetarian. It's just there's so many conflicting trends out there, almost competing in so many ways, right?
I'd like to say just, when we talk about moderation, I wish we could do it. We've been saying it for years. People don't know what moderation is today because it's, I'll be good today, not tomorrow. Also, when you talk about your parents, your grandparents, they weren't living at a stage where we have Uber Eats, and we have so much in front of us for cheap. So when you talk about, meat or not meat, I really like that Canada's Food Guide just developed a new food guide. And I should say there has never been a book ever written for Canada's Food Guide. And not to promote, my next book coming out is based on the new food guide, which is more plant-based. No one understands what a food guide is. They don't understand a measurement like this. They don't want to weigh 2 ounces. They need to understand in general what a healthy diet is. So is meat allowed? Absolutely. But use it to garnish your salad, not to be a main course.
All right, well, when we come back, the Mediterranean and keto diets. What are they and why they're on the rise? That's next.
So we're not talking about processed grains, we're talking about whole grains, buckwheat, teff, quinoa, wild rice.
Welcome back. Earlier this year, U.S. News and World Report released its annual ranking of the world's best and worst diets for 2020. According to a panel of 25 health professionals in diet, nutrition, obesity, food psychology, diabetes, and heart disease, the Mediterranean diet was ranked the #1 diet for 2020. So let's start there. Rose, what is the Mediterranean diet?
I love it. I think it's the best diet. I wish we could have it. It's a pyramid where the bottom layer is grains. So here we are in Canada and the States banning all the grains. They're saying to have grains before anything else, fruits and vegetables, then olive oil, nuts, seeds, yogurt. And as you start to climb up, you see poultry, fish, meat's the last thing, and then desserts. So they're saying meat once a month in the Mediterranean diet, and sweets occasionally, and red wine, of course, is fine.
Well, that's interesting that you're allowed to continue to, where did this come from? Obviously, did it come from the Mediterranean?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, many of the blue zones are in the Mediterranean. The blue zones are areas in the world where people are the most healthy. They live the longest.
But you mentioned a pyramid, so does that mean you should be eating grains the most,
That's
and then
what they
eventually
say.
making its way? You would think that.
You would think, but their base is grains, 100, and we're talking about 100% pure grains. They don't eat 100% pure grains, but their bottom layer is grains, and underneath that is move more. So they right away say that you've got to be walking and exercising.
I think what's confusing for a lot of people is that they confuse whole grains with crackers, cookies, breads, pasta. So we're not talking about processed grains, we're talking about whole grains, buckwheat, teff, quinoa, wild rice.
And it's good in preventing certain conditions like diabetes,
Dementia.
dementia. And why is that, Megan?
Well, the diet, especially with the whole grains, you don't see as much insulin production as you do when you're focusing on sort of like the standard North American diet that's really heavily focused on refined and processed carbohydrates. So if you think of type 2 diabetes as a condition caused by insulin resistance, which is caused by toxic levels of insulin within the body. So on a Mediterranean diet, you're not getting this toxic level of insulin accumulating in the body to lead to insulin resistance, which then has a domino effect of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease.
So I think it's so important that we stress, when we're looking at these diets, it's not just about weight loss. So much of it is about just generally being healthy. Now, another one that's very popular right now that I think everyone I know is on is the keto diet. Who wants to start? Nadine?
So I'll start by explaining what the keto diet is. A lot of people seem to be confused about it. What it is it's a very high fat diet, moderate amounts of protein, with very low carbohydrate levels. What that does in the body is that it, by restricting the amount of refined carbs, starches, sugars, you're encouraging your body to switch from using sugar as fuel, glucose as fuel, to using fat in the form of ketones as fuel. And that metabolic switch has shown many benefits, health benefits. Specifically, there's been good studies that show reduced body fat if you follow the ketogenic diet. It helps improve energy. Some people find it helps their digestive issues. It has been shown to help with IBS, irritable bowel disease. It even helps with brain health. It has been used in neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even concussions.
But the keto diet is very different from the Mediterranean diet because it has a real focus on meat. So again, we talk about, these conflicting messages that we continue to get. But ultimately, does it boil down to who's appropriate for this kind of diet? Or, how are we to know which one to adopt?
I think people just have to experiment for themselves. A keto diet's definitely all fat encompassing, whereas the Mediterranean diet focuses more on monounsaturated fats, whereas in the keto diet you see a lot more saturated fats. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about the quality of saturated fats. Are they healthy? Are they not healthy for you? Well, it really depends on the fat. And when you look at the scientific literature, it's actually a nightmare because they'll publish a study that's saying keto's horrendous for you, but then when you actually read the study, they're feeding these people or animals like highly processed soybean oil. Well, no one's going to be healthy eating that. But what about olive oil? What about coconut oil? What about good grass-fed beef? What about salmon, wild-caught salmon? There's a big difference in the quality of fats here.
Now, one of the things about keto is that you're supposed to cut out carbohydrates altogether, and I think some people look at that and they think, okay, this is good because it'll fight cancer. I'm cutting sugar completely out of my diet. Is it true that in cutting back on sugar, there's a correlation between that and cancer?
So there is. There's a huge correlation between it. When you have cancer, they do a PET scan to see where that cancer is. And what they do to visualize that cancer is to inject you with glucose, because it excites the cancer and then they can visualize it better. So there's a huge relationship between sugar consumption and cancer. When it comes to the ketogenic diet and carbohydrates, what I find is there's a ton of misinformation out there. Like you must stick under 20 total grams of carbohydrates a day to stay in a state of ketosis. Well, that's not true. I'm a 35-year-old woman. I'm healthy now. I didn't used to be. I can eat 100 grams of carbohydrates and still stay in a deep state of ketosis by eating real food carbohydrates, eating the olives and the berries and the kale and the nuts and the seeds. So it really depends too on the quality of the carbohydrates. There's a big misconception about that. If you're eating cookies as your carbohydrate on a ketogenic diet, then you're going to run into problems. But if you're eating strawberries and olives, you're not going to have any issues.
Very quickly, Rose, what would a day in the life of someone on the keto diet look like? What would they eat?
Oh my goodness, I think it's so restrictive. So they'd eat fat, butter, they'd love that. They could have bacon, they could have steak, a few berries, a few greens. What they can't have are beans, starches like sweet potatoes, starchier vegetables. They can't have low-fat dairy. I think it's a really tough diet unless you have to be on it for medical reasons to stick to. because I think we love grains, we love all sorts of vegetables, and you can't have that.
All right, well, when we come back, we'll discuss the paleo diet and intermittent fasting. That's next.
So the purpose of fasting is to suppress your body from producing any insulin that it needs other than for your daily bodily functions to keep you alive.
Welcome back. Intermittent fasting has been making headlines lately, with some stars going head-to-head in the debate over whether or not to eat breakfast. Then there's the paleo diet, which follows the hunter and gatherer approach. Let's start with intermittent fasting. Megan, I'll go to you because I know that you actually use this every day in your life.
I did. So my background's in clinical research, and I was working at a kidney clinic. And I was trying to help my kidney patients clean up their diet. I was 25 and I thought, oh, I should really get my stuff together and start following the Canadian Food Guide. Within a year, I had developed type 2 diabetes and gained nearly 80 pounds. So that didn't work well for me, actually. While we were setting up, I actually saw one of the dietitians that was mentioned in conversation, and she accused me of secretly eating Oreos, because how could I gain that much weight following the Canadian Food Guide? So I paid for 6 sessions with her. I saw her twice. So I tried radically changing my diet, but I was brought up on, garbage foods, being born in 1984. So we started fasting. It was easier to not eat than to change what I ate. And then I started to feel better on my fasting days, which made me want to feel better on my eating days, and that caused me to overhaul my diet. So within 6 months of committing to a fasting regimen, I reversed polycystic ovarian syndrome, fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, and I lost 60 pounds. Wow.
That's
so
incredible.
It really was inspiring to us, my colleagues in the medical community, and to the patients that we saw. So we started seeing type 2 diabetic patients and intervening with intermittent fasting and trying to get them to adopt some sort of real food diet, whether it's a real food Mediterranean, paleo, or ketogenic approach, depending on what we could work with their body chemistry. And we've had a lot of success taking people off of insulin, and I mean off of insulin for 10 years after having been on it for over 30 years.
Unbelievable story.
I've had
That is
patients
incredible.
that were able to get off of their diabetes medication as well
It's really cool.
by following these
So,
diets.
so what is the intermittent fasting diet then? I mean, what does that entail? Is it just, eating at certain times of day, or are there certain restrictions as well?
I can say, and then you can continue. It's, you have choices, 16 hours where you're going to basically not eat, and the 8 hours you do eat. So traditionally you go to bed at 9 o'clock, so you don't eat until 1 o'clock the next day. And then there's a 5-2 method where 2 days a week you have 500 calories a day, which is, to me, starvation, especially if you want to exercise. On the other days, you can basically eat what you want. And I've met people who, they just can't condition themselves, and they really go overboard knowing that they've got 2 days where they're going to be starving.
Is that just it? Is it just, you restrict yourself from eating during those 16 hours a day, or are there certain foods that you're supposed to omit? And by the way, I was raised being told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
It's a therapeutic treatment you're looking to achieve. It's not just cutting calories. It has nothing to do with calories. It's about the hormonal effect. So if you're a type 2 diabetic out there, or you're struggling with severe weight gain or obesity, you have a condition called insulin resistance. So what a lot of people do is they try to cut out the foods that cause their insulin levels to go up. So they usually gravitate towards a ketogenic diet. But what happens is that the insulin resistance itself drives your body to produce more insulin. So it doesn't matter if you cut out all of the carbs. If you already have the condition, it's going to drive it up. So the purpose of fasting is to suppress your body from producing any insulin that it needs other than for your daily bodily functions to keep you alive. So you actually break the cycle of insulin resistance, and you can restore insulin sensitivity. So it's not that you can never have a piece of cake again. But 8 years ago, if I had a piece of cake, my blood sugar levels would double or triple. Now, if I have a piece of cake on my birthday and I check my blood sugars 2 hours later, they're within the normal range. So that's how you restore the insulin sensitivity, and we see it all of the time.
And they say also when insulin is low, you're burning more fat.
Much more fat, yes.
The way I explain it to my patients is like this. Your body, when you're eating, is busy breaking down and digesting your food. But when it's not busy with digesting and breaking down your food, it's actually getting rid of old cells and building new cells. So if you're extending that time where you're giving the body that extra kind of space to work on some areas in your body where there's weaknesses, it can really maximize your health, and it can prevent some conditions as well.
So how about the paleo diet then? What's the paleo diet? Because that's another one that we hear all the time.
It's sort of a real food approach to eating, sort of the marriage between a keto diet and a Mediterranean diet to a certain extent, or you just eat real foods. Depending on the version of the paleo diet, though, that you follow, because even within the community, there's some conflict over whether dairy is a paleo food, whether nuts and seeds and legumes and lentils are considered to be a paleo food or not. But it's just a real whole food approach to eating. I think it's a very sensible approach to eating, and where most people should start and then see how their body responds, and to make adjustments towards maybe more of a keto or more of a Mediterranean diet, depending on how you respond to things like legumes and nuts and fat and meat.
I use the paleo diet with many of my autoimmune condition patients. It really, really helps with PCOS. And I don't ask them to limit everything right away. I really work with the patients to try to figure out what their food sensitivities are, and we start from there. And so there's a more flexible form of following a paleo diet, and then there's a more restrictive form. And depending on their lifestyle, their habits, we might go one way or the other.
All right, well, when we come back, a new trend in cocktail making. Don't go away.
When I talk about sustainable cocktails, I'm really thinking about where ingredients come from and how we can work with local farmers to support local business.
There's a new movement emerging in the beverage industry. Meet sustainable cocktails, mixed drinks that save money, time, and resources while also helping to save the planet from added waste to some extent. Kelsey, what are sustainable cocktails?
When I think about sustainable cocktails, I'm really getting people to sort of think about where ingredients come from. You know, you think about a margarita, and well, limes come from Mexico, and tequilas, it can be good or bad. And then you're thinking of like triple sec, which is a high sugar, sort of highly processed thing. So when I talk about sustainable cocktails, I'm really thinking about where ingredients come from and how we can work with local farmers to support local business as well.
So they're not new cocktails, they're existing cocktails made in a sustainable way. So you can make a sustainable margarita, a sustainable strawberry daiquiri. I don't know all the cocktails.
I think, yeah, you definitely can. I think cocktails are always one step away from their original daiquiris, or it's always just one step away from that. I think at my cocktail bar, Supernova, they're all very much their own thing. But when we're thinking about making cocktails at home, it's always easier to relate it back to something familiar for people.
Okay, so you at your cocktail bar, you do make some new ones. So what are some of the different types of sustainable cocktails you serve to your customers?
Yeah, so we work with a lot within seasonality. So making sure that, we're getting the best possible produce from farmers at a given time during the year. And oftentimes what that means if a cocktail is going on a menu for a period of time is that we have to make that thing shelf stable. And that's where a lot of fermentation comes in, which is sort of a trend that we're seeing in the cocktail community. Kombuchas are coming out. We make a kombucha right in the bar. We got really lovely organic peaches at the end of last year and made like a whole bunch of peach wine in the bar as well. And now as we're kind of going through the end of the winter months, we're really looking at more seaweeds and herbs and different things that are a lot of nuts. There's a lot of Canadian nuts that are grown in Quebec and Ontario as well. So these are kind of some of the things that we're working within now.
But what about the alcohol?
So spirits are an agricultural product as well. When we think of vodkas and whiskeys, they're all made from grains, and they can be made from GMO, or you can do a little bit more research and find that things like Maker's Mark is not made from, that they don't use any GMO products within their distillery. There's a lot of research that's done, and the spirits that are curated on the back bar at Supernova, for example, we do a lot of research to make sure that they are produced in the right way.
Mm-hmm. You know, Irene, we've been talking about trends. What are some other trends in the beverage industry that we're seeing this year?
Well, definitely something that I've noticed is that there are people that are moving towards zero alcohol beverages and also low alcohol beverages. So recently, I actually encountered a few companies that were coming out with, there's a company out of Stratford actually that just launched a 0%, gin type spirit. And also another company that I saw that came out with a 0% Prosecco, which obviously isn't real Prosecco, but the flavor is there. And
How does it taste?
I thought it tasted pretty good, personally. And it's a great substitution for people who are avoiding alcohol for health reasons, or I think health reasons are a big thing. And I don't know if you're noticing that at your bar, that there are people that are looking for more mocktails as opposed to alcohol.
We make sure that we have, it's also about inclusion, making people that either don't drink or don't want to drink feel like they can walk into a bar and have something to order that's not, juice or soda. And that's where we're seeing more like kombuchas being served. There's a non-alcoholic distillate, like you were mentioning, called Seedlip, that's really amazing. So they have 3 different expressions that we're using. And then we've created like a non-alcoholic wine, like you were saying, Prosecco, that we make from like rice and pear. At Supernova, so there's a lot more options. It's wonderful to see.
You know, it is interesting. I've tried quite a few non-alcoholic beers, and it feels like some of these major companies are really investing it in this way because they taste great. I think it's like light years ahead of the first non-alcoholic beer. I mean, they taste so real. And so I'm wondering, what is driving this? Is it health reasons, or is it people, moving away from alcohol generally? What do you think?
I think a lot of the people I work with are trying to stay away from alcohol for health reasons. And they feel like they're going through sort of extreme measures to regain control of their health. There's more and more information out there. People are becoming overwhelmed, but they're trying things and they're finding things that work for them, so they want to optimize it. So they want to reduce other things that might be causing them to not live optimally. So that's what I see with alcohol.
But then you think the Mediterranean diet, you're allowed to drink red wine. Right. So how are we supposed to know? Is alcohol good or bad? I guess everything in moderation, going back to Pat's point, right?
Well, and also it's the antioxidants in the red grape that people are feeling the health benefit from, and moderation.
Marissa, though, also with the whole move of CBD now and THC being legal, I've noticed that people are saying, okay, I'm going to go to an event where they're going to have a CBD infused dinner, but no alcohol. Yeah. So that's where these drinks are really coming in now.
We'll be touching on that on the other side of the break. Stay tuned.
With edibles, it can take up to 2 hours before the effect kicks in. And this is where people get into trouble.
A growing trend with Zoomers is the use of medical marijuana as they discover the plant's many medical benefits and how they can incorporate that into their everyday cooking. And to help us get started, I was welcomed into the kitchen of cannabis cooking expert Pat Crocker, who explained that an oil mixed with cannabis can create a solidified oil or cannabutter through the process called decarboxylation.
Zoomers are discovering that cannabis can help them with pain, with inflammation, help them to sleep. But let's get started. Let's explain about the plant itself. So what we're looking at here is a sativa leaf, which is uplifting, creative, versus indica, which is often what Zoomers will want to go for because the effect will happen in the body. It's more sedating. When you buy your cannabis, you're going to be purchasing whole leaf, and it's going to be raw. And because they're THCA, which is the acid component in the cannabis itself, you're not going to feel any psychoactive effect, no matter how much THC is actually in this strain. What I'm going to show you today is how to decarboxylate, which only means how to burn off some of the acid that's in the raw cannabis and make the THC viable. So the way to do that is to put it into an oven, and we're going to set the temperature to 240 degrees and leave it there for an hour. And now we're going to move on to step 2 in working with cannabis, which is to infuse a cooking ingredient. So how do we know how much cooking oil or other cooking ingredient to use? You start with the amount of THC that you have in your strain, and we know from looking at the label that ours was very low. It was less than 1% THC. So if you look at my chart, if you always use a half an ounce of cannabis, then I would use 1.5 to 2 cups. Cannabinoids infuse better into a high lipid fat, and then we strain off the cannabis and use just the strained oil. I want to save this spent material and keep it and use it in smoothies. Now, because it's coconut oil, it doesn't need to be refrigerated, but the spent cannabis that we strained off is going into the fridge because it will only keep for a month, and I'm excited to get into the kitchen and cook with you, Sean.
And I am excited to cook with you as well. Remember, if you want to utilize your newly made canna butter, visit our website at onetv.ca for more recipes. Here in Toronto, Sean Stante for theZoomer.
Welcome back. We've been talking about trends in the food and drink industry, but one we haven't touched on yet is cannabis-infused food. Pat, there seems to be a lot of interest in the use of cannabis and CBD in food post-legalization. I guess when it comes to cannabis-infused food, my first question would probably be, how do you know how much to use, how much is too much?
And that is just the perfect question because it's all about dose. It is really all about dose. And there's a few things that people need to know about edibles. And the first is that it's not like smoking. When you smoke THC in cannabis, you see a response within 20 minutes, so that then you can decide whether you want another puff or not. With edibles, it can take up to 2 hours before the effect kicks in. And this is where people get into trouble because they eat a bit, wait a bit, oh, nothing's happening, and I'll have more. And so then it all kind of peaks in the body because it's processed differently when in edibles. It's processed through the liver, which makes it a completely different experience. You can, the THC can come on stronger and last longer in edibles. So those are sort of the first cautions. But apart from that, putting it into food is a really personal thing, and people need to look at themselves as a cannabis experiment almost, and start with low doses. And I always recommend full flower so that you're getting not just the two most famous cannabinoids, THC and CBD, but you're getting all the 110 other cannabinoids that can help you with pain, they can help with sleep. All of those things synergistically work together in the plant.
Are there any nutritional benefits to cannabis-infused food, or is it really the health?
The typical mycines, there are terpenes and flavonoids, which are all those active ingredients in all plants. So they're also, because it's a plant product, those terpenes and flavonoids are in the cannabis plant itself. So they're going to be imparting not just cannabinoids, but all the full range of other essential oils and active ingredients. So yeah, I would say
So,
So.
you know, what are some of the things that you brought in with you today?
Well, I always talk about full flower. So we've got a full flower strain, and maybe a couple of things that we need to know right off the bat about cannabis, because it's a plant. Cannabis is the Latin term, and it's the term that I use for the plant itself. I don't use any of the other you know, sort of nicknames for it. And there are two strains that we're currently working with. One is sativa, so it would be C. sativa or C. indica. And while most cannabis, all cannabis that we buy now isn't a pure strain. It's not a pure indica or a pure sativa. There are still sort of dominant strains that have sort of dominant indica properties or dominant sativa. Basically, to distinguish between the two strains of the plant, I always tell people to think of indica as working in the couch. So it comes over you in the body, the feeling. So that's good if you're treating pain and arthritis and inflammation. If you want to sleep, an indica product is a good product to work with. Sativa, on the other hand, is euphoric. It's creative. People use it for creativity, for rituals, for those kinds of things. And generally, it's taken in the daytime.
You know, Megan, Nadine, what do you say to your clients that ask about incorporating cannabis into their food?
So the research is still coming out. We don't know a lot about how cannabis can really change the way you metabolize food. We don't know much about that yet. But what's really exciting is the discovery of the endocannabinoid system that we all have, which are basically receptors throughout our bodies that respond to these plant substances. So there's a lot of medicinal qualities. We know it's used for pain reduction, but in terms of nutrition and diet, we just don't know enough about it.
What about side effects, drug interactions? What advice do you have?
I don't really have. I have a lot of patients that take it for pain. And if anything, it's sort of a miracle if they can figure out the right dosage. Like if they have someone guiding them, because the pain is reduced, the inflammation is reduced. It makes them more likely to stick with their dietary plan. And you know, when you're more likely to stick with a dietary plan, you're going to be successful. So they're getting results. They're reducing their need for medications in the first place. So there's not really that much of a concern for interactions. So for most diabetic or blood pressure, cholesterol medications, there's no interactions that I've seen clinically with taking cannabis in any form and having a negative impact.
All right, well, that's interesting information. When we come back, final thoughts from our panelists. That's next.
Don't forget, for free tickets to the show, go to www.universe.com and search Zoomer Media and log on to www.thezoomertv.com for full episodes and more.
Welcome back to the Zoomer. It's time for final thoughts from our panelists. Starting to my left, Rose.
Marissa, I think I really believe in you are what you eat. So if I could just encourage people to eat more at home, less processed foods, don't order in every minute, try to just cook at home, break bread together as a family. I think it's great.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, I feel like we've come such a long way from just meatless Mondays, right? And plant-based eating is definitely on the rise, whether it's for health reasons or if you're being more environmentally conscious, you know, about eating less sustainable foods. And there are so many conflicting information that's out there, but there's so many resources for you guys as well. Like at Chatelaine, we definitely try to develop recipes that help people cook at home more, as you mentioned. and also, take those first steps to establishing better eating patterns. And we actually have a plant-based recipe issue out right now for chatelaine. So yeah, there's lots out there.
Fasting doesn't have to be radical. I think a lot of people see that and get scared. But just going back to the basics, we talked earlier at the start of this episode about, grandparents. So my grandparents grew up eating 3 square meals a day. My grandmother wasn't allowed to have a snack before dinner, and she sure as heck wasn't allowed to have a snack after dinner. That meant she didn't eat enough broccoli. So just going back to those basics, when I first started fasting, everyone thought I was nuts. But my grandmother, she said, I didn't gain weight, I didn't become fat till I started letting potato chips happen before dinner and after dinner. So she said, good for you for just sticking to those few meals. And I've seen that make such a huge change in people's lives. Just going back to the basics, like our grandmothers did while growing up.
Okay, I'm going to talk about drinks for a minute. I just want people to think about where your ingredients come from. Where can you support local farmers? Can you swap out your sugar syrup for honey where it's possible? Or just come down to the cocktail bar to Supernova and let us do it for you.
And I think my final thought, Marissa, is that food can heal us. Food is our basic the body knows how to use the food we give it. We just have to give it the right food and become our own health and food advocates.
Choosing the right diet can be a difficult process of trial and error. But what any diet has, what we eat really has to provide us with the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals that our body needs to function properly, to heal itself. So it's really important to work with a knowledgeable health practitioner that can help you and support you to find the right diet for you, for your lifestyle, your family's lifestyle, to help you reach your health goals.
All right, well, that's all the time we have. A big thank you to my panelists for being here. We'll see you soon. For now, it's time to zoom out.